this show is we have 1 month left. So now we want to just hit a few articles here to let you know what we're talking about.
Right.
We have 1 month, Sandy, from right now until what we've been talking about on this show
Yes.
for a long time.
Yes.
We actually read a part of the initial draft of the pandemic agreement. It's actually called the WHO pandemic. Well, I had the name of it. What's it called? It's not agreement.
Is it at the top?
It's not agreement. It's
WHO
It's pandemic. It's not agreement. It's another word. Can't think of it right now. The official word. But so here's the thing.
Are you trying to say pandemic treaty?
No, I thought it was just treaty, but it's not treaty. It's what is it? I'll think of it.
Well, this article says they're revising the pandemic agreement.
Yeah. I've heard a few people you know who pushed back? The continent of Africa pushed back. Many countries in Africa pushed back. So supposedly they're going to do some amendments. Okay, let's see. Americans stand just a week away in the rest of the world from handing over massive amounts of taxpayer funding, protective equipment intended for U.S. citizens, and incalculable amounts of influence over U.S. policy to the World Health Organization. The global governance body will resume meetings to revise the WHO pandemic agreement on Monday. The Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, established to draw up the text of the agreement in December of 21, will hold its 9th meeting from April 29th to May 10th. That provides just over 2 weeks before the 77th World Health Assembly.
So that started today.
Meets from May 27th to June 1st in Geneva, Switzerland, to ratify the final document. The most recently updated version of the proposal for the WHO pandemic agreement, amended on April 22nd, would redistribute wealth and protective equipment away from the United States and establish a global governing board with little accountability to U.S. citizens, and critics say watered down U.S. sovereignty on how it responds to future pandemics.
That ought to bother a lot of people. That ought to bother everybody.
Absolutely. Whether you're American or not, but especially Americans.
Yeah.
The latest version of the agreement calls on nations to adopt, quote, whole of government and whole of society approaches to pandemics, quote, including the private sector and civil society. Governments should carry out so-called education programs that will suppress competing narratives about the pandemic, as the U.S. government did during WANWAN. Nations must also conduct research to determine what forces hinder or strengthen adherence to public health and social measures in a pandemic, such as mask and vaccine mandates. WHO makes it clear it intends to involve itself far beyond the physical aspects of the outbreak. The latest agreement invokes the, quote, public health impact of growing threats, look at this, such as climate change, poverty, and hunger.
One world religion,
Fighting
one world
pandemics in
government.
states requires nations to achieve greater health equity by taking resolute action on the social, environmental, cultural, political, and economic determinants of health. I'm going to finish reading this because everybody needs to know this. This includes adopting a controversial, quote, One Health approach, which attempts to, quote, balance the, quote, health of people, animals, and ecosystems as though all were equally valuable. Nations have the right to adopt legislation only, quote, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, the WHO Constitution,
Satan's
and
army.
the principles of international law and their sovereign rights over their biological resources. They may not make reservations that are, quote, incompatible with the object and purpose of the WHO pandemic agreement. And it goes on.
I mean, if you had any doubt that this is in relation to a one world order and a one world system, that's exactly where we're heading.
New World Order.
Scary. I mean, the language in this article, I mean, we haven't even read the entire article, but what we've read so far is just downright scary.
And we're reading quotes. They're quoting. They're putting in quotations what's in the document.
Yeah.
Well, let's read on, Sandy. I know you want to hear more.
Oh, yes.
The controversial document mandates that all nations assure, quote, real-time access by WHO to 20% of all, quote, products that are needed for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. 10% as a donation and 10% at affordable prices. WHO in turn will create a mechanism to ensure the fair and equitable allocation and distribution of the pandemic-related health products globally. Nations will agree to, quote, prioritize sharing through the WHO's newly established global supply chain and logistics network over bilateral donation agreements adopted with allied nations. Every nation shall also create a global health emergency workforce deployable to support other signatories upon request. In other words, you'll have a full-time employees that are all about, if this nation needs masks or needs WAWAs, we take a portion of what we've got and we send it. State-to-state foreign aid amounts to wealth transfers to up-and-coming young oligarchs in smaller nations. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. Now this gets into commentary here. The Family Research Council says, you know, what they think about it, says this is a turnkey totalitarian state, and many other observers are warned against viewing the newest text as modestly less intrusive document than some previous versions, which is not true. So this, ladies and gentlemen, this is why it's not clickbait. When I put on that thumbnail, we have 1 month.
Yeah. We've been talking about this for how long?
A year and a half?
At least a year.
No, longer than that.
I think it's been about a year that we've been covering it extensively.
Tyler from Generation 24 has been doing it for almost 2
supposedly
years.
just
We
said
followed it
21.
so strong
The
last
first
year.
draft was 21. It just started getting leaked.
Yes.
But like I said, there are some people that's pushed back. Many African nations pushed back and said we don't want to be a part of this. So who knows what's going to happen? But I can tell you this: the plan is that this peace treaty, this pandemic treaty, is going forward. So this is just another article here. This is from Harbinger Daily. With only weeks away, experts urgently warn WHO pandemic treaty will usurp U.S. sovereignty. That's what this is all about. It is going in the language. It gives permission during a declared pandemic. And oh, by the way, the only one that can declare it is the WHO.
How convenient.
Yeah, and if the WHO declares it, you can't not. If you've signed this, you cannot say no. We don't agree. And you at that point, when the emergency declaration is established, it has in the writing in this that we have read on the air that it basically, for temporary, in air quotes there, temporary overriding of certain rights and privileges of sovereign nations. So you got Geneva, Switzerland, that could determine that there's a global thing happening with this bird flu. And guess what? You won't be hearing from President Biden or President Trump about a shutdown.
No.
You'll be hearing from an organization on the other side of the world saying you are mandated to shut down. That's the world we live in.
Very, very disturbing.